starts with you, only you. A cosmic dance, a truth so true. From the ether to the earthly plane, all you seek, you can attain. The quantum flow, the light you hold, creates the story that will unfold. Every thought and step you make, the universe is yours to take. It starts with you, the mirror's hue, infinite skies reflecting you. From the void, you birth the light. Through the shadows, your soul takes flight. The winds will shift, its timeless bend. Every cycle begins again. Your energy builds, it flows, it streams, aligning rims, igniting your dreams. Each vibration, each sacred sound, a universe moves resound. You are the spark, divine and true, illuminating. It's all you do. Just remember, it starts with you, the mirror's hue, infinite skies reflecting you. From the void, you birth the light. Through the shadows, your soul ignites. The path within, the path divine. Through space, your world aligns. Every rise, every fall, you're connected to it all. It starts with you, the quantum view, manifesting dreams like the morning dew. From the stillness, creation flows. Through the darkness, your spirit knows. It starts with you, only you. Through dimension, through the veil, the sacred truth, and you prevail. Now infinite, clear, and true, this road ahead, it's made for you. It all begins and ends with you. Even the chaos, through the flame, you rise anew, never the same. Every heartbeat, every sign weaves your essence, soaring high. The cosmos bends to your command. Creation blooms within your hand. It starts with you, only you, only you. It starts with you. Welcome in the space, family. Happy Sunday. We're going to come in here and hold some space tonight, and we're going to take our time. So we're going to get this thing started tonight. We're going to get our disclosures on the way. I share my own experiences on my journey to healing. I am a certified life coach, and my mission is simple: to restore knowledge of self, rooted in balance, truth, justice, reciprocity, and divine knowing within me. The beautiful thing is you don't have to abandon everything that you've been taught to receive what's available, because access is already within you. And I love that. So tonight we're going to be holding some beautiful space, and I'm going to remind you of so many things, some powerful things. And I quote, the works that you see me do, you can also do works that are greater than these. And how can I do these works, Ty, you ask? From gaining the power from within. So while you're waiting on Jesus, lend me your mean time, because if you don't recognize the responsibility in the process, everything you do is useless. So if it don't apply, let it fly. If some apply and some don't, eat the meat and spit out the bones. If it all applies, eat it all and apply the knowledge. Topic tonight: only God can judge me. So we're here for a short time. I'm hoping Not a long time. I got a little carried away with this one, but before we get into this, I have to set the intentions as we always do. So I'm going to ask you to come into the space and take a deep breath with me as we go on the journey of unfolding tonight. And as you breathe, notice yourself for a moment. Notice what feels heavy as you exhale, confusing. Notice that. And what no longer is fully aligned inside of you. See if you can notice that. It's not about attacking ourselves. It's not about shame. It's not about pretending we've already, have all the answer. Tonight is about awareness. As we move through this space tonight, just notice what you're becoming and what you are aware of. And I want us to sit with some simple questions as we enter this space. I want us to ask us, what in my life has stopped producing life in me? Not emotionally or impulsively, but consciously. We're going to be consciously aware. And tonight we set the intentions to slow down enough to notice the signs, to stop overriding our awareness, to stop confusing survival with peace, and to honestly examine what missions we've stayed loyal to out of fear. And maybe tonight we don't need certainty. It's okay. Maybe we just need, enough honesty to ask, is this still producing life in me, Ty? Is this still producing life in me? And if not, may we have the courage to reevaluate, to reconnect with the balance and stop carrying missions that are no longer serving us, but instead they're destroying us internally. And in this space tonight, we choose awareness over fear and conscious living over unconscious survival. And in this, I understand that everything that's mine starts with me, and what's yours starts with you. And I say, and so it is. Whole tip, topic tonight, only God can judge me. And I'm going to use the quote as abort mission. Hold on, y'all, a second. So come in and say hello as y'all get in the space tonight. Welcome in. Welcome, welcome. We're going to get this thing started. We love holding space here. So I invite you to stand in the space with me. Take deep breaths as we go throughout this space. For those of you that are new coming in, my name is Tyson Matawi, and I welcome you into a space where it starts with you, where there's no shame, blame, or judgment. However, we do hold ourselves and one another accountable. But here in this space, we do a lot of things different. And by now, we should have built some muscle. So when we get in the gym with Ty, we already understand what's going to be showing up in this space. So here, on It Starts With You, we don't repeat information. Now, we may recap it and show how it connects, but we don't repeat information, but we slow down enough to observe, when those things happen. What things do we observe, Ty? What connects, where it's leading, what it produces internally, collectively, and whether it creates alignment or it creates confusion. Welcome in. And so I want you guys to come and hold space. And as we expand tonight, if you feel comfortable and you want to share something in a chat, please feel free to do so. This is a open and welcoming forum where you can share. And if you rather remain anonymous, send it to my inbox and I'll hold space with you on your behalf. But before we go there, last week we unpacked and we left off and we unpacked the topic of resignation. The resignation letter. And if you were here, then you already know it wasn't just about church. That's not everything that Ty talks about. It's about finally becoming honest enough to admit that we spend years working jobs and roles and relationships and systems that paid our survival. And we don't want to continue doing that. We unpack what it looks like to perform, to people please, to wear these masks and abandon ourselves. All the things while ignoring the conditions of our inner world. We talked about how exhausting it becomes, waking up every day tired, spiritually drained. Welcome in. Hey, hey. Emotionally disconnected, internally conflicted while still clocking in anyway. In other words, we understand what it says when we hear keep on keeping on. So PSA, as Ty, as we tie in tonight, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, and probably some of the questions you have been wondering about, or you're afraid to ask. Ty is not afraid, and I'm going to ask them on your behalf if you don't feel like it, and hopefully it resonates with you. Because I'm not okay with being deceived. And family, let me remind you that we look at things not only from a physical level, but from also a metaphysical level. And with that, we ask questions that are deeper. Who told you it was time to resign? Because if only God can judge me, if that's true, and judgment means, and we're going to be unpacking this tonight, judgment means examination, discernment, weighing the evidence, and looking at the fruit. The resignation was not the beginning. The judgment, the examination, the awareness, the evidence all came first. You seen the fear, the exhaustion. You recognized the contradictions, and you saw the imbalance in your own life. And eventually you realize it's no longer producing life. So maybe the resignation wasn't rebellion like they told you. Maybe it was the verdict. Maybe it was the result of finally examining what your life was producing and responding to that evidence and what showed up in that space. Maybe that. Because before you can abort the mission, you have to recognize that the mission is flooding or something is going on that ain't aligning. And we're unpacking that too. And that's where we are tonight. Where only God can judge me meets the resignation letter. One thing for sure about Ty, if it don't make sense, she encourages you to question it. So don't just take what I say, go and look it for yourself. She encourages you to question. You're not going to get none of that. Don't ask no questions. We don't do that over here. And in this, you will discover that the one thing that's beautiful is the examination. And the other is the response to what examination revealed. It's about resigning from the emotion, suppressing, and inherited expectations that keep demanding more from you while slowly destroying you internally. And that naturally brought us to my quote of abort mission. And I had a whole teaching about abort mission, but I tabled it because something else showed up for me. And over here, we're not going to do that. We're not going to, when something shows up in the space for us, we're not going to just ignore it. We're not going to press it down. We're not going to pray it away. That's not what's productive. That's not what produces life. That awareness arrives when a person finally realizes, I've been surviving and I'm tired. When I said that, I think about the songs they used to sing us all the time. They used to say, I've been working for Jesus a long time and I ain't got tired yet. I call BS. Where are you running to? And what fruit has come from all this running and all this work that you put in? What do you have to show for it? I'll tell you what showed up for me: a whole bunch of fear, self-abandonment. So tonight, family, it's time to stop running. That's what we always tell people. We tell our children, if you don't stand up for yourself, the bully is just going to keep bullying you. And we don't do that. We're not running. Because originally the abort mission didn't mean that you were weak or a form of failure. It meant that there was some sort of interruption. That reevaluation was necessary so you could change direction and stop something before further destruction happened. So you recognize that some danger was already done. And family, that matters psychologically. And because many of us were taught to keep enduring, even when the nervous system is already flooded internally and you can't take it anymore. So tonight we move from that resignation letter to the abort mission, and that the topic tonight is only God can judge me. And tonight I want to challenge that statement that we all grew up with. We all grew up saying, just to blame, something or somebody else for the thing that that you didn't want to be held accountable for. Because whether we know it or not, it's because you don't want to be held accountable for these things. So I'm going to blame somebody else, even though I know it was all me. And because many of us have repeated those words our entire life without ever slowing down enough to even ask, who told us that? And what does it mean in the first place? So tonight I decided to put it on trial. I'm going to lay it out before you. And I decided to argue the case. And I'm going to take my emotions and my feelings out of it, and I'm going to put them and I'm going to set them on the shelf. I'm going to check it at the door to examine this evidence. I'm going to hear the witnesses, and I'm going to weigh this testimony that comes before us tonight. Now slow down and examine the actual patterns, because, you pay attention to what Ty is unpacking tonight, you won't be able to unsee this. And I'm setting this thing up for court tonight. I wish I had a gavel. I tried to find one, but I couldn't. But before we proceed, I'm going to tell you guys to all rise, and do it virtually. All rise. Y'all do it for your pastor. So why you listen? They do like this, and y'all rise up. Why you can't rise? Why you can't raise up for this? But court is now officially in session. Case number ISWY 777, the human nervous system versus fear-based religion. Presiding tonight is the judge, Awareness. Facilitating this hearing is going to be attorney Ty Simatawi, the attorney for the nervous system, the counsel for the abandoned child, the representative for the emotionally exhausted, and the advocate for every person who was taught what to think before they were taught how to examine anything. And tonight, it is my pleasure to facilitate this. So the court is now in session. The plaintiff now is the human nervous system, your body, because it keeps the score, the collective and generations that were taught by fear before awareness. The defendant tonight, welcome in the space family. The defendant tonight, again, is your fear-based religion. Your inherited, welcome in, your inherited condition and unconscious interpretations. And you are the jury. The evidence will be submitted, and it's up to you to weigh it on the scales. I don't make that determination for you. But by the preponderance of the evidence, we're going to take a look at what intent shows up. And that's what many of us was not aware. That's why we were not aware of these original meanings. And because of that, we are bringing the charges up tonight. So what are the charges, Ty? Spiritual neglect. I'm making the accusation. And we're going to be approving. We're going to prove this tonight. Emotional conditioning, psychological suppression, misinterpretations with intent to control, fear-based dependency, accessory to self-abandonment, and crimes against conscious awareness, etc. Just to name a few. Now, before the prosecution presents the evidence, the court would like to establish a motive, because fear-based religion is not not on trial because somebody prayed, or because grandmama sang those hymns so good and got you on the morning bench. No, fear-based religion is on trial because we're examining its fruit. It's the outcomes that show up from it, the psychological effects, the delusion that keeps you going round and round again on this emotional roller coaster. That's what we're examining tonight. In the wilderness, all of your life, and still committing the same sins over and over again. And you just have no idea why. Why do I keep doing this over and over again? I just don't understand it. But Ty, tonight I need you to help me make sense of this. When your text tells you, whosoever abideth in him sinneth not, and whosoever is born of God does not commit sin, I was talking to you. And I know you think you're hiding. Why don't we talk about these things? Because according to the text itself, abiding should produce transformation, and transformation should produce different fruit. But let me guess. Only God can judge you, right? I figured you would say that because I did too. So I know how it goes. And I understand that. You can't accept the truth and how the nervous system responds, the emotional conditioning, and what has been producing collectively. And I know why. Why, Ty? Ladies, we often say we want the truth, but we can't handle the truth. Our nervous systems, more often than not, do not have the capacity, and we reject the truth because it threatens the story that we've become emotionally attached to. Same thing goes for religion. Listen, Jesus said, sell what you have, give it to the poor, and follow me. The direct issue was not about money. These is where the misinterpretations come. The issue was the attachment. The attachment to those things, even if it was hurting me. I want to cling to that. And that man claimed he wanted truth. And when he was asked to let go of what he depended on the most, he couldn't do it. It's the same thing that's showing up. When you're asked to let go of that thing that has a chokehold on you, whatever yours is, drinking, substance abuse, whatever yours is, that's what we're talking about, those things. Now, I know the prosecutor might say the money wasn't the problem, Ty. The dependence was on, the money, and I know I hear y'all say it all the time. It's not the money that's the root of all. It's not it's not the money that's evil. It's the love of money that's the root of evil. And the crazy part is, whatever you can't let go of, it has more control over you than you realize. I need us to understand that. Those things that we're holding on to, that we're saying that we're going to pray it away, that we're saying that we're going to get rid of it, we're going to cast it down, it has more control over you than you want to realize. And metaphysically, I know y'all don't like when I say that word, but riches represents anything that you've been attached to that prevents you from growing. So that alcohol that you drinking, that prevents you from expanding. Those thoughts that you have that prevent you from expanding, all of the things. Put your name on it, whatever yours is. So those old beliefs, the traditions and of your grandmama and them, and those false identities, that certainty, that status that you cling to, are the stories you tell yourself about who you are. That invitation to follow me is an invitation to release what owns your mind, what has a chokehold on you. That's your invitation. so you can become conscious of a deeper truth and a higher version of yourself that you've been running from. So tonight, allow Ty to stand here in I'm going to stand pro bono and help you. I'm going to help us navigate the questions and the evidence that you need to look at, that you're afraid to ask about. And because I want to go a little bit deeper to define this language I'm speaking about tonight, I had to take a step back because oftentimes I'll assume that we understand what these words mean. We don't. I did it. And it's okay that we don't. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. How do you know, Ty? Because throughout history, these systems of domination, including colonial and the white supremacy system, have controlled your education, your language, and your historical narratives. I know because I was a part of it. I was the queen of recall. I can recite information, I could memorize it. I had no idea what it was that I was saying, what it was that I was believing in, what I was allowing myself to become a part of. I had no idea. But they knew. Whoever shapes how you understand reality influences how you understand yourself. And when you lose access to your language, your history, and the ability to critically examine information, in my words, to actually critically use your African mind to think, you become more dependent on authorities to define reality for you. That's fact. And if you want to argue that, debunk it with verified information. But take it from lived experience. So I'm going to get to my favorite part. I know I get beside myself sometimes when I get excited, but let's unpack this. When I say or have used the excuse only God can judge me, I didn't know what it truly meant. So I did my due diligence on my behalf, and I'm sharing what I unpacked in my journey of discovery. Now, in the biblical text, and I use these as allegory because it's what I know, and I've been raised with it from a child. So oftentimes I'll share those things that way. Now, in the biblical text, the word often translated as judge comes from the Greek word kerno. Kerno means, let me tell you what it didn't mean first. It did not mean to condemn somebody, to punish them, to shame them, or send somebody to hell. It does not mean that. It did not mean that. And I'm saying that for the people in the back. And it don't. It meant to examine something and use your discernment to evaluate it so you can separate what you need to separate and make a distinction between that. Now, why is that important? Because if judgment originally meant examination, and there's a process to that, but you inherited that judgment is punishment, then the interpretation changed the emotional, meaning of the text. What's wrong with that, Ty? Your relationship with reality changes. Now that it has a different context provided to it, reality should be changed. And instead of examining life to understand it, you begin performing life to avoid that punishment that they told you that you'll get. That's two separate things. So on one hand, the origin tells you to have awareness so that you can discern, you can hold yourself accountable. While on the other hand, it goes against that. And it shows up as fear and dependency. And because in this court of law, the court has to ask based on that, just that alone. Did we inherit the original meaning? Or did you inherit an interpretation of that meaning that was passed down, watered down? And by the look of the evidence and watching what something produces over time, it's evident. Compare that So how many of us inherited the idea of judgment the wrong way? And I know I'm not the only one that looked at this thing and said, oh my goodness, because I did this, this is going to be my punishment. And that don't sit right with me, that for years and years that I'm judging myself, holding myself accountable, blaming myself in one direction. They've been playing in our faces for too long. Look, they give you condemnation, a punishment that'll send you to hell. Not only that, if you're not careful, God is watching every little move, they said. Write down, and he could tell you how many strands of hair you have on your head. So God is all knowing, but you got free will. We've unpacked that free will before. And it's impossible for free will to exist if someone or something knows your outcome. We're going to pause right there just for a second. Sit with that. Because that's a very different interpretation than what we've been given, and it's dangerous. The dangerous part of that is those inherited interpretations come from people that never took the time to even examine this information for themselves. But we take it as gospel because uncle and grandpa and daddy and them said, and they was dealing with their own emotions and their secondhand understanding of it being passed down from generation to generations to them, from them. Not even realizing if fear wasn't even a part of it. Hold on, guys. I gotta make sure I keep my music on. It's my vibe. Welcome into the space. Happy Sunday. Topic tonight: only God can judge me. So, they would have been non-compliant. You can lie to yourself all you want. I have never heard a pastor tell a story about accepting their calling without them telling their scare story. Never. I have never heard it. And if you disagree, send it to me so I can see it. So I can say, okay, now I've seen it. I have never seen a pastor say, I was called to be a pastor, or I was called to do this, without them saying, I've been running from it a long time. And, I got sick and never heard them. And they take that and they pass that down as truth because they felt something like fire shut up in their bones, they say. And that is not what that means. That's why I keep saying, if you want understanding about religion, study creation, study history, not his story, but history. I could even say her story. That was given to you to perpetuate this white supremacy. You must study the language, the psychology, and the original context. Because if you don't, you'll keep inheriting the same misinterpretation, going around in circles doing the same thing. Now in Kemet, long before Christianity even surfaced, judgment was connected to Ma'at. And Ma'at was not centered around fear, eternal punishment, or a sky daddy watching your every move like Santa. Ma'at represented truth, balance, harmony, order, reciprocity, integrity, and alignment with creation. And this is why they would take the heart and weigh it against a feather. Not because God was waiting to torture you, but because your life revealed whether you lived in balance, if you caused unnecessary harm, whether you were being truthful, and if you were operating in alignment or in chaos. So in comparison, the modern fear-based interpretation, one teaches awareness and balance, and religion teaches fear. Fear me. And this is why tonight matters to Ty. I ask you to place your things on the scale tonight as we unpack this. Not the scale of opinion and tradition, but the scale of truth, balance, and what the evidence is actually revealing. You say it's going to be weighed, right? Weigh it now. As we unpack this, weigh it now. Topic tonight, only God can judge me. We've been taught what to think. Most of us have. And when I say most of us, I'm one of most of us. Before I even could think about anything or examine it. Now, family, that's a very different understanding of judgment. Because if judgment is about examination and evidence, consequences, truth and balance, then judgment is not something waiting for you after you die. I don't think I can say that. Unalive. Judgment is happening every single day. Right now, through your relationships, through your nervous system, through your choices, your patterns, your body, and what life is being produced. So the court is not asking, were you perfect? The court is asking, what does that fruit do? What that fruit do? What does that look like? What is your evidence that you're at peace? That your awareness, your balance, your healing. These are the things you can't hide. Why you say that, Ty? Because I see that we're sick. I see that how much we're going to the doctor. We're part of the community that has the highest blood pressure issues. Your fruit. And I can know the unseen things from the things that are seen, including the Godhead. And don't take this personal. Because I have to put myself on trial too. And I know based on my own life. Like y'all say, as I look back over my life, I see fear. I see shame and confusion and being sick in my body. I see what my fruit, what was a result of my work. So I know what it looks like. Now I'm going to move the evidence a little bit closer to the jury, because the prosecution is not arguing that you're evil. I'm not saying that. The prosecution is arguing that many of you, instead of being taught what goes, what goes with your nature, you are given things that move against it. Family, this automated nervous system, and this is neuroscience, so go and look it up. Don't just take my word for it. So many things are happening naturally without your permission in your body, automatically. Let me give you an example of this so that you can hold space with what I'm saying. When you have to go pee, when you get hungry or thirsty, what about your attachment? And that danger detection that shows up. Y'all ain't gonna like this one. That sex drive that you're trying to cast down, that you will never cast down. That fight, flight, freeze, the body is constantly trying to protect you, preserve you, and keep you alive without your permission. So the court must ask, if these things are automatic, why does religion make so many of them, evidence of, corruption? Why is desire, your body, why is questioning and being human a problem? Ty, let me find out. Welcome in, family. Ty, let me find out. All my life that I've been fighting parts of myself. I've been suppressed in my human nature, suppressing, feeling guilty about parts of myself, only to find out that these things are automatic. And you have your sex drive, natural. In other words, the body is already trying to keep you alive. Now, hold on. Because if some of these things are automatic, and religion teaches me that they're evidence that something is wrong with me, then the courtroom has another question, Ty. What happens when a child is taught to fear parts of themselves that are natural? What happens to children? They survive by splitting into to good and bad. So they start to split. This is happening to your children right now. I'm putting you on. Welcome in, family. Good and bad. And when these things happen, they start labeling them as safe and dangerous. This is accepted. This is rejected. And now think about what many of us have learned. God is good, but you're bad. Spirit is good, but the body is bad. Obedience is good. Questions are bad. It causes you to split. And before long, you're fighting yourself. One part of you wants connection, and another part of you feels guilty for wanting it. One part of you feels desire. Another part thinks desire makes you sinful. One part of you wants to ask questions. Another part is scared to ask. So now the battle isn't between you and the devil. The battle is between you and you. Family, that's why this matters, because the body is trying to move towards balance. Neuroscience calls it homeostasis. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to use this as an example, the way Doc gave it to me. So imagine this. It can go either way. I'm going to use it this way just for the sake of explaining this. This is homeostasis, balance. It puts you in center when everything is good. And let's go back. If you gotta pee, right? I gotta pee. When you first feel that urge, it starts tilting just a little bit. But you wait. The longer you wait, the further you go away from homeostasis. And that automated nervous system is waiting to do. Let's get back to center where you were. Let's get back here. But now you're here. But wait, now you're in a tight. And you're wiggling around in your chair. And you're getting further and further away from where you belong. And those of you that know, keep holding it if you want. You won't have any control over it. Your body will do what it needs to do to relieve that. And once you release it, you get back to center. Until the next time, same thing, just a reset. Same thing shows up with your breath. Hold your breath and see what happens. You're going to get further and further away from homeostasis. Kemet called it, our ancestors called it ma'at, balance, that harmony, order, right relationship. So the body is not the enemy. The body is just trying to remain in balance without your permission. And that means only God can judge me. It isn't about punishment. It's about paying attention to whether we've been living in balance. are creating that flood that's causing us to, come on, Ty. That same flood that we've been praying to be saved from. And all of that knowledge has been filtered through generations of misinterpretation, passed down. So tonight, what if I told you that when people are removed from their language and their history and their culture, removed from their relationships with themselves, and they inherit somebody else's explanation of reality, what happens then? Hear me carefully. This is not about hating anybody. It's about examining ideas. Because if you take that away, their land, their language, their stories, their symbols, and their understanding of themselves, and then hand them a completely different framework, your body is sinful, cast it down. You're a wretch. I unpacked that before. It wouldn't be logical to examine the results that are coming from that, according to religion. To look at the magic book that was handed to you. And not have question about these things. It's not logical. Not from the disciples themselves. Because they were, don't get me lying. How does it say it? These brothers were unlearned and ignorant. And you mean to tell me today, if Ty introduced somebody, or if Ty came to you unlearned and ignorant, that you would hand me your keys to your salvation without asking me a single question? If you showed up in here and Ty was unpacking these things and you couldn't just go and look it up and substantiate this evidence that Ty is giving you, you mean to tell me you don't have no questions? Y'all have to be playing with me. Welcome in, Jakari. Welcome. So why y'all don't have the same energy for Ty as y'all had for them brothers back then? With information that wasn't even written by them, but hundreds of years later. This is not logically sound, and y'all know it. Keep that same energy that you normally use in every other area of your life, but you won't. Family, I'll give you that. Let's say some of you do believe these stories happening exactly how they're written. Let's say, for shits and giggles, let's do it. But here's what I find interesting. With all that, the time that has passed, shouldn't we at least find out what they added in or what they left out or what changed through these translations? How much of what we're reading is original meaning and how much is someone else's interpretation of the meaning? Because every translation passes through a human being, somebody that was actually sitting down translating this from this to that. Those human beings, you have to deal with their fears, their beliefs, their culture, their biases, and their understanding showing up in that text. Now, whether you believe the story happened literally or not, it still doesn't remove the psychological pattern being taught. Because the pattern survives the interpretation. The flood still teaches about overwhelm. The wilderness still teaches about transition. The prodigal son still teaches about a separation and then a return. The judgment still teaches about examination, which is why I believe we've gotten stuck arguing over if it really happened. Did this happen, Ty? And we're missing the whole thing. We're missing the point. What is it teaching? Because if we stop and take every story only as an historical event, we can begin to see it as a miracle, as a mirror to our lives, a mirror showing us ourselves and what our lives are producing. And family, that's where the real power is. Because whether the story happened 2,000 years ago or not, and not for the record, the question before the court tonight is the pattern happening in you right now. Dr. Simatawa says, how does it show up in your life? Ty is saying, how does it show up in your life? Because if it is, then the story is still alive. Tonight, the prosecution intends to show that many of you were taught to look outside of yourselves for things that you were never taught to recognize within you. And maybe that's why the statement, only God can judge me, is so powerful to me. Because if God is always somewhere outside of you, then authority is outside of you. Truth, power, validation, and judgment, all of the things are outside of you. But what if the original question was never about looking outside? What if, when Jesus said the kingdom really is within you? That's what your magic book says. Ty's not saying anything any different. Because if that's the case, then the journey was never about spending your life searching outside of yourself for what was already trying to emerge from within. What if it's about examining what your life is showing you? What's so scary about looking at your life? Now I'm going to take a look at creation for a moment, because Ty says that if you want to know about it, look at creation. This is beautiful. Because if you want to understand the thing, look at what it does. Look at its relationship. Look at its function. And Ty says the evidence is the fruit. It says you would know the tree by the fruit that it bears. We're examining our fruit tonight. Take the sun for instance. And I'm talking about the S-U-N, not the S-O-N. Ra, the bringer of light. Its relationship with creation is unconditional. The plants, the animals, the ocean, you receive it. If you're rich, if you're poor, it doesn't matter. Life receives it. We receive warmth, we receive light, we receive vitamin D, and the evidence of all its relationship is everywhere. Just look around. We receive the conditions necessary for growth, that life-giving energy, the illumination, the order, creation, and the sustaining force that makes life possible. Just look at it. You don't have to recognize it by its reputation or its title or because it got special privileges. Just look at its fruit. In other words, examine what it produces. The sun doesn't have to tell you it's a giver of life. Them plants grow. The body receives nourishment from it. Without it, life would perish. It would cease to exist. The evidence is visible because it shines. And if we were made in the image of the Creator, then shouldn't our fruit look similar to that? Shouldn't our awareness show up instead of ignorance? Shouldn't we grow instead of being stagnant? Shouldn't the truth show up in us instead of deception? Shouldn't balance show up instead of chaos? Understanding instead of fear? Responsibility instead of blame? Life instead of destruction or unaliving? Here's where I begin to question certain interpretations, because if the fruit is the giver of life and that's the force and its growth and its life, then why are we in so much fear about casting down our flesh? Because those fruit don't look the same. That sun doesn't grow a plant by threatening it. The sun grows a plant by providing the conditions necessary for life. I remember showing y'all at one time, how water thrives. Water grows what it touches. It gives the right environment, and life begins to emerge from that. Seeds grow, plants grow, the ecosystem grow. Water doesn't argue with people about what life is and how life shows up. It supports it. And that's why that flood story was so interesting, and it kept drawing me to it. And we're going to unpack that tonight. So I want you guys to hear me with your logic. Use the left hemisphere of that brain tonight take a deep breath first. Because I know Ty says a lot of things that gets us, discombobulated in our nervous system. So take a deep breath and calm yourself. Family, when emotions get loud, the goal is not to suppress them. The goal is to slow down enough to examine what is triggering me that Ty is saying tonight. What has me out of alignment in my nervous system, because I can feel it in my chest. I can feel it in my stomach, in my arms. I can feel it. What am I feeling? What is this that triggers me? What evidence do I actually have? Because those strong emotions can make you react. But over here, Ty wants us to examine and sit with it so we can start responding instead of being so reactive. And that's what fear-based religion interferes with that process. Because when you're operating from a place of fear and guilt and shame and emotional urgency and all the things low vibrational envy and anger, you become less likely to evaluate those things that show up. You just more likely to obey. Topic tonight: only God can judge me. I'm asking us to examine the concepts of God and what we inherited. Because the concept is simply an idea, a framework, a way of understanding reality. And the court has to ask us tonight, what was the concept of God before the text came along? This Bible hasn't always been there. That biblical text hasn't always been passed around. Back in the day, the Pharisees and the scribes, only the elite guy had access to this information. Don't sleep. Because the writings for us are carved in the stones way before they gave us Christ with the C. Before that showed up on the scene, long before what religion gave you existed, our ancestors been on. Ty's putting you on. Long before that. This is why we have to know who we are. Because these people came from all over to study in Kemet. They went there to study our math and our science. They went there to study medicine and the stars and how it connects with nature and how life works. Contrary to what you've been told, our ancestors are the founders of all these things. Imhotep was the first doctor and first polymath. They came from all over to get this knowledge. And then they take that information and they feed you what they want you to have. And those ancient traditions understood the divine through relationship with creation. The life-giving force, the organizing force, the intelligence visible in nature, the order behind existence. Now, family, this, think about what happens psychologically when you're taught that everything powerful is outside of you. Truth, wisdom, authority is outside of you. Salvation, the answers are outside of you. God, it's outside of you. What happens eventually is you stop looking within. And the result is dependency, low self-esteem. You start doubting yourself. You can't trust your own decisions, so I got to take it to. People, that turns into a people that are fearful of making mistakes. That result is abandoning your own judgment while saying only God can judge me. Not realizing that if judgment means examination, you've been given the ability to examine yourself, to judge yourself for a really long time. And when you stop examining yourself, you become easier to control than you are to empower. So no matter how many times Ty get on here and say, I'm going to empower you, I'm speaking life into you. These are the things that we have to do. We have to tap into the herbs. We got to tap into nature. We got to go hug a tree. We got to put our feet in the grass. No matter how many times Ty says that. That system that was given to you will rule your life. Even though your text tells you to test everything, you'll make an excuse for that. And you won't. You won't examine it. You'll stop developing your own relationship with reality and just be okay with living in a fantasy. Perhaps the greatest shift wasn't simply changing a person's religion. Perhaps it was teaching you to look there, out here. For what you once understood through relationship, observation, awareness, and knowledge of me. And if that's true, then tonight, case becomes even more important for me. Because before you can understand, only God can judge me, we have to ask what evidence supports that concept. And because this is a courtroom, the burden of proof still applies. The evidence must be substantiated. Give me the evidence. And while I'm waiting for you to show it to me, give it to me. Let me ask this again. What happens when you're given a concept of God that is always outside of you? Because when Ty asked you for the evidence, I guarantee you looked at everything out here and never in here. A bigger God than you, a God separate from you. And I'll tell you what happened over time. Instead of developing that knowledge, that discernment that y'all say y'all have, and that conscious awareness, you become conditioned to look everywhere else for answers. To question your own experiences, observation, and that examination that was designed to help you understand. This is why, many of our ancient teachings, creation itself shows up in it. It's on the walls. They can't deny it. They're trying to destroy it, but they can't deny it. And creation reveals those patterns, order, relationship, and everything about what people later call God, generator, organizing device is always organizing. The systems, the body, cells organize, nature organizes, life organizes it. And you can't fully understand your relationship to creation if you don't pay attention to these things. Now, notice what happens in religion. And that raises another question before this court. And I told you guys, I'm going to ask a lot of questions that you don't feel that you want to ask or you choose not to. I'm going to ask anyway. Why are you so uncomfortable when someone begins talking about the power that they find within themselves? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, shoot. Hold on, y'all. Let me fix this. I'm sorry. It's making me do a post piece. All right, we back. I thought they used to always tell us as children, and we sang the song, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine." Why does self-knowledge threaten you guys so much? Why does my self-knowledge offend you? Why does questioning create so much fear? Why is it that the moment a person says, "I don't believe in that God," you cast them to hell and you want people to come from amongst them? Sit with that for a moment. And I had to sit with that because a few years ago, I would have been nervous to even say that. But even your Jesus wasn't amongst them. He said, "It is not he who that is well that needs the physician. It is he that is sick." The prosecution is showing you tonight that this is a fear-based system. This system survives by convincing people that power, truth, and authority exist everywhere else except where you can actually examine it. Everywhere else except for where you can examine it. And that's why this matters so much. Contrary to what you believe, tonight is not about your religion. And it's not. What is it? What is that tie? Because that self-knowledge, that tie is on the journey to discover, is often mistaken for self-worship. When in reality, knowing yourself is the beginning of understanding your relationship with everything. I dare you to go and ask your pastor, why are you encouraging me? Why are you encouraging your congregation to fear themselves more than fear ignorance? I'll wait. You wait. You should be asking too. Because from Kemet forward, one principle keeps appearing. Know thyself, Ty. Ty says it a different way. It starts with you. And perhaps before we can understand what it means, we say, only God can judge me. How can we even say that when we don't even know who we are? You're made in the image and likeness, right? what we are and what relationship we have to the life that's sustaining us. Because again, judgment is not separation. It was meant to bring you back into alignment with yourself. Creation itself teaches relationship, balance, consequence, reciprocity. Nothing exists by itself. Why would you say that? Because everything is in relationship. The sun has a relationship with the earth. Water has a relationship with life. Plants have a relationship with the soil. A human has relationship with each other. And I know why y'all out here saying you don't want nobody. Lies. Throw it in the trash, take it to the landfill and bury it. My independent ladies, we are wired. Hear me. We are wired for connection. I know we've been hurt. I know we've been through all the things. And I know you want to get your dogs and be content. But that ain't it. Because that automatic nervous system, that sexual crave that happens naturally. And I know y'all gonna say, I don't have that. I'm just gonna get my rose. That thing that's showing up for you to even want to do that. And I have the truth for you. It is not the same. They ain't nothing like the real thing, baby. And creation teaches that balance, getting us back here. And too much of anything, either way, too much of anything creates a problem. Too much water and it floods. Too much water creates drought. Too little water creates drought. Too much creates a flood. Too little creates a drought. Too much heat burns. Too little heat freezes. Back here, it's a time and a place for everything. It's about balance. Creation teaches consequences because every action produces a result. Plant a seed and watch something grow. Neglect it and see how it died. Unalives. I have to be careful. And creation teaches that reciprocity because what you're putting into a thing affects what comes back from it. Care for that soil, and that soil gives you fruit. Abuse the soil, and eventually your harvest it's going to suffer. Now, what's interesting is the text teaches these same principles. I don't shit on what it says. I don't, because I understand that you can eat if you pay attention and you live by it. Look, it says, you will know them by their fruits. Consequence. Whatever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. That's reciprocity. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit. That's relationship between cause and effect. To everything, there's a season. Balance. So maybe creation has been teaching the lesson this whole time, and you didn't even know it because you weren't paying attention. And maybe that's why I keep saying, if you want to understand the text, understand creation. And I'll keep saying it. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Because it's going to go back. It's a circle of life. Relationship, balance, consequence, reciprocity. And in this courtroom, the fruit is still the evidence. And I have not moved. And I love why I'm going with that. So tonight is about examination and whether the interpretation we inherited matches the evidence. So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, court has been in session for a while now. Why are you doing this, Todd? Because this is my journey and I'm sharing it with you. And I made it my business to do that. And we're going to examine the evidence because I spent my life. You spent years of your life saying those things while still emotionally exhausted, not having an idea of what it truly means. Because they were taking, they took it out of context. And because I'm in relationship, I'll ask on your behalf. You don't have to ask. So ask them, Ty. I got you, sis. Because even the neuroscience, the body is already responding naturally to that fear, that stress, that trauma. When you start suppressing the things, that things and that contradiction, that the contradiction causes, your nervous system is already reacting to how you live. Your relationship reacts, your body, your mind, all react. So judgment is not just later. So when Ty says, do it now, don't wait, do it now, same thing. Now, family, let's assume for a moment that judgment is not just something waiting for us later after we go up to yonder. Let's just assume that. What if judgment is already showing up through your consequences, through that imbalance that you got, through your relationships, through your nervous system, and what your life is producing right now? And if that's true, shouldn't that question change? Now we're no longer asking, but will God judge me later? We're asking, what's showing up right now? What's showing up for you? Pause it right there. Because if the body naturally responds to fear and religion teaches fear, then what is it producing psychologically? And this is the question exactly why the flood story matters to me. And I've heard so many times this story so many different ways has been flipped, and it was about punishment at one time. If it every animal on this ark. And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world the numbers don't work? There are millions of animal species on the earth, and the ark would need space for the animals themselves, the food, the water, the waste removal, the air ventilation, separation between predators and prey, habitats, temperature needs, insects, birds, reptiles, mammals, etc. So from a literal standpoint, fitting every animal in the world on the ark is not a realistic thing. Family, the ark was never about logistics. It was an allegory. Because physically, every animal on earth does not fit on one boat, and we should all know that. But metaphysically, the ark can represent presenting what still has life in it. Everything that went on that ark still had life on it while the earth and the world was flooding. But what if that story, what that allegory was describing, wasn't punishment at all? And we're going to look at that. Because I like when the courtroom gets interesting. Because if the evidence supports that argument and the connections, things connect, then this fear-based religion may not be only the defendant, it's a co-conspirator, an accessory after the fact. Because it supplies the interpretation that taught you to distrust that very awareness that could have helped you examine this evidence for yourself. Which brings the prosecution to Exhibit A, the flood story. I've been waiting all night to talk about this. I want to remind you of something. I'm not here tonight to argue with you. I don't do what the deconstructionists do. I provide the evidence. You go look it for yourself, whether you believe the story happened literally Because whether you believe it happened, I'm literally, symbolically, metaphorically, psychologically, the question before the court remains the same. What is the story trying to show us? Because if we do, all we do is argue about it. I'm not doing that. But let's examine it. The text tells us there was violence, corruption, destruction. They were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, whatever that means. And depending on who you ask, the sons of God have been interpreted as angels. I've heard them say that. I heard them descendants of Seth, rulers or kings. I heard as divine beings. I heard they were symbolic forces and Nephilim. They were represented as, literal giants, mighty warriors, and tyrants, powerful rulers. If the flood was supposedly triggered by something that this significant, why do most of your sermons, why does most of the things that you teach about spend very little time unpacking that section to have us understand what it means? Because right before the flood, we suddenly get and based on what they gave us, people become consumed by harmful behavior. Basically, in layman's term, as Ty been unpacking all night, balance was lost. Now, based on all of those things, because they didn't give us much to go on, they just gave us little snippets of things. Based on that, that doesn't sound like a healthy society. That doesn't sound like peace or harmony. Does that sound like ma'at? Balance? No, it don't, Ty. That's why God destroyed it. So the evidence is already showing you imbalance. And according to creation, imbalance always produces a consequence. Now the defense would like for you to believe that God got angry, lost his patience and his temper, and punished everybody. And that's one interpretation. You can take it that way if you decide to. So I acknowledge that. But now let's examine another possibility. Because a lot of the details was left up to your imagination. What if the story is describing what naturally happens when destruction continues long enough without interruption? Because creation already shows us pattern. I don't know about that, Ty. Well, let's look at creation. I already told you, if water is balanced, it's going to give you life. If that water keeps rising, it's going to flood. If you can manage your stress, the body adapts. You recover. But if stress keeps rising, the nervous system floods. If fear keeps rising, the mind floods. If violence keeps rising, society floods. If shame keeps rising, the spirit floods. Now, all of a sudden, the flood starts looking less like random punishment and more like a consequence. Cause and effect. Now, the prosecution submits the following argument. Before the flood ever appeared externally, the flood had already begun internally. Consciousness, relationships, behavior, society, awareness was flooding. The water simply became the visible manifestation of a pattern that had already been occurring. You would know the unseen things from the things that are seen. In other words, the people were already being judged by what they were producing. The flood didn't just show up. The flood was the result of the actions, of how they were living. So from my perspective, only God can judge me. It's not nobody can tell me anything. It's the truth will eventually reveal what my life has been producing. Because if I'm creating chaos, if I'm creating confusion, if I'm creating harm and imbalance, eventually a flood is going to come. Not necessarily a flood of water, but a flood in my mind, a flood in my relationship. I keep picking the same people, expecting different results. So I'm going to get a flood. I'm going to get that new person back. My body's going to show up in my finance. Here comes another bill. After just when I pay that off, here comes something else. Or in my community. So the lessons of the flood is not God got mad. The lesson is pay attention before the water gets too high. Pay attention before you get emotionally dysregulated. Pay attention before. That's tea. Because judgment is revealing of whether you're living in balance or creating the very flood that will eventually consume you. And it will, it's no matter, it's not if, but when. Because at one point you're going to get tired of being sick and tired. Now let's examine another piece of evidence, because here enters Noah. But the defense says Noah was just a man and perfect in his generation, and Noah walked with God. Perhaps, but I object. I don't know that I can agree with that, because it also says after the flood, Noah gets drunk. So maybe righteousness was never about perfection. Maybe it was about alignment. Maybe Noah wasn't the only perfect man. So what made him different? Maybe he was simply the only one paying attention while everyone else was off doing their things while this water is rising. And that's a very different conversation. What if Noah was the awareness? Peace, beloved. Do it for, what does that say? Johnny. Thank you for sharing that. Toe tip. What if it represents awareness? The awareness that we're supposed to have, so that we can see what's happening. The part of consciousness still capable of observing the patterns. The part that's willing to listen, willing to prepare, willing to recognize. He did all of those things in this allegory. Commission is no longer producing life. Now, family, what we have been talking about for weeks is the resignation letter. Aborting a mission. Only God can judge me tonight. The pattern is the same. At some point, awareness recognizing continuation is creating destruction. Because originally the abort mission did not mean that you were failing, that you were weak, or that you were defeated. It meant interrupting a course of action before further damage takes place. And isn't that exactly what I just described in that story? The pattern becomes visible, the destruction is visible, the imbalance becomes visible, and eventually the mission gets interrupted. Now I'm going to bring the ark into evidence. Because many of us so busy focusing on these animals, two of everything. We're so busy in that. But I'm interested in the function. What was the ark's function? The function was to preserve life. Come on. To protect what still had value. It carried forward the remaining alive. And psychologically, that's what awareness does. It keeps a person preserved while allowing those destructive patterns to end. Now, the defense may object and say, you're making the story symbolic, and I am. That's what your own text tells you. That's not Ty being the messenger. It says that it's an allegory. And I'm using it in its proper context to demonstrate a point. And I'll respond, even if you read it literally. Let's do that. The pattern is still going to remain the same, because regardless of the interpretation, the story is still asking, how much destruction has to occur before awareness intervenes? How much can I take before I say I had enough? How much imbalance can I deal with before something has to change? How much flooding has to happen before the mission is aborted? Now let's connect that back to the case before the court tonight, because many people inherit an interpretation that says, fear it. You just got to fear it. I've never seen and never been so aware of so much fearful stuff in my life. But my evidence is suggesting another possibility, that maybe the flood is it wasn't primarily teaching fear. Maybe it's telling you that creation is doing its job. Creation is creating. Which brings us back to the statement entered into evidence tonight. Only God can judge me. Because according to the evidence presented so far, creation has been rendering its verdict this entire time through the fruit of its actions. And the fruit of the actions in the allegory. So it is a revealing of what our choices are, what our beliefs, our systems, our patterns have been producing. And family, I know that don't sit right in your spirit. And honestly, that's exactly why we need to talk about it. Because the moment evidence starts challenging conditioning, something inside starts pushing back. Not because it's wrong, but because it doesn't match the model that you've been carrying, that was given to you by this white supremacy system. Remember, we unpacked the prediction era, how your brain builds models about reality and how the world works. Remember that? And when new evidence appears that doesn't match that model that you were given, discomfort is going to show up. You're going to have fragmentation all up and through here. And you were taught to call that the enemy, the devil. Family, what if I were to tell you and submit into evidence tonight that sometimes the enemy you've been looking for isn't out here? It's you. We used to say, it's me. It's me, oh Lord. The part of you that's fearful and unaware, that keeps repeating those same patterns while expecting a different result. Insanity. Because if it's you, then you are the one creating the flood. And that's what we have to face. The fear, the chaos, the confusion, the self-abandonment. So before you go off and start blaming the devil and blaming demons, I'm possessed, blaming everybody else except for taking accountability and scapegoating everything else, I want you to recognize, did I not say the year of God's, the generator, organizing device? The one creating the one that's creating, the one that's organizing and directing your life through your thoughts, through your choices and your actions. When can we stand up and hold ourselves accountable? You can also be that, because the same power that creates balance can also create imbalance. The same mind that creates peace can also create chaos. And the same person praying for rescue is the one ignoring the evidence that can prevent this and stop you from experiencing this. So I submit to the court. The enemy is not outside of you. It's the unconscious patterns operating within those things that you have no awareness that you're doing. That religion tells you to force down, to cast away, and don't even think about it if you just happen to notice it. I'm making good time. If you don't know about that, that's fair. But before you dismiss it, ask yourself how many floods in your life were created by someone else? And how many were created by patterns you never stopped to even look at yourself? And you're still in this wilderness. And family, the wilderness becomes interesting when you realize that you left bondage physically, but bondage has not left you mentally. You're carrying around that fear and dependency and that survival thinking and that hypervigilant, all those things low vibrational. And the ego's job is not to stay, awake all the time. And we're just disrupting it. Most of the time it's running in the background, but it wakes up when something threatens your safety or your survival. It starts asking, what's happening? And it starts looking for a solution. What solution actually works? But when people live in fear long enough, that ego becomes attached to familiar suffering, because the known fear, that known feeling feels safer than the unknown. And that's where that interference comes in. Instead of teaching you to examine yourself, it teaches you to immediately, I'm going to go see who I can blame today. And fear just keeps running amok all up and through your nervous system. And you never realize you're participating in that very thing. And as I think about that, the wilderness was not about wandering. It was about interrupting the transmission of fear. This weapon was so thought out. And I tried so hard to disprove it. Trust me, I did. I tried to find evidence that fear, conditioning, authority, repetition, and group influence didn't shape the way we think. But the deeper I looked, the worse it got. These aren't just religious ideas. They're documented in psychology, in neuroscience, and behavioral science. They know that you are influenced by fear, by repetition, by belonging, by that reward thing that you get, by punishment and social conditioning. They know that ideas repeated long enough, especially during childhood, become a part of how you see your reality. This is why they told you, give me your children, so that they can train. Y'all, this is what y'all say. Train up a child so they won't depart from it. And they know that because they know what happens in your body. They know that fear activates the nervous system and shifts the brain into survival mode. They know that people will conform to a group or an authority, that you'll conform to that authority figure, even when evidence suggests otherwise. So I don't even have a question if the conditioning works. The evidence tells me and shows me in the fruit that it does. And if that fruit of those beliefs is those things that keep you low vibrational, then at the very least, the court has the responsibility to examine this evidence. Because I didn't arrive here trying to prove this. I arrived here trying to disprove it. And the more I examined the evidence, the harder it became to ignore what it was revealing. Family, this is getting ridiculous. After everything we examined tonight, the flood, the wilderness, the body, the nervous system, the ego, the fruit, the conditioning, the fear, the shame, the contradictions, I would hope that we can start questioning only this only God can judge me theory, what it actually means. Because when we started this hearing, many people imagine judgment as something waiting for them later. Something, a distant day, one of these old mornings, future future punishment, something cosmic. But what if the courtroom was never later? What if the courtroom was always here? What if the witness was always your life? What if the evidence was always your fruit? What if the testimony was always your body? What if the verdict was always showing up in your relationships? Then what? The flood didn't begin when the water arrived. The flood began when the imbalance was ignored. The wilderness didn't begin in the desert, it began in their minds. And the judgment doesn't begin after you're unalive and you transition. Judgment begins the moment life starts producing evidence. Because every day your life is testifying. Your body, your relationships, your habit, your peace, suffering, and your fruit is testifying. And unlike people, fruit don't lie. So tonight I'm not asking you to believe me, even though you should, and it would be a really wise thing to do. I'm asking you to examine a lot of the things that you've been given. Examine what you've been handed, what you've inherited, what you were told to fear, what you were told never to question. Examine the beliefs that taught you to distrust yourself, the beliefs that separated you from your own body, where you can't even tell me what you're feeling and you can't even express it. The beliefs that taught you to fight yourself. Because maybe the greatest trick was never convincing you that God would judge you later, but convincing you not to examine yourself now. And if that's true, then your religion that you hold so tight to your chest and you hold so dear is not innocent, it's guilty. Because any system that will benefit from your fear, that depends on your fear, and don't tell me fear isn't it, it ain't in it. Don't tell me that, because I hear you say it in your breath every day. I fear no man but God. I hear you say it. But on the other hand, God did not give me the spirit of fear. So which one is it? And you know what? I don't even believe that y'all fear God the way you say you do. I don't. Because you wouldn't keep backsliding and doing what you're doing. You're just going to do what you want to do despite and say, I'm only human. I'm just a man. No, I don't believe it. The kindest people that I've encountered in my life haven't been Christians. The majority, hold on, let me fix y'all. Hold on, family. I did good tonight. We got about 15 more minutes and we're going to be good. Yeah. The majority of experiences and people that I've experienced some type of hurt or disappointment or some type of, not jealousy, but them being jealous or showing these things, came from people that say I'm still under construction and God ain't through with me yet. That's my experience. Examine yours and see if that's your experience. But what about whosoever abideth in him sinneth not? And that very system, any system that benefits from your shame, depends on your shame. Any system that benefits from your dependence depends on your dependence. And if you ever fully wake up, fully examine, fully become aware, many of those systems lose their power because awareness is bad for business. Let you become aware and start asking questions in the church. They're going to be quick to try to get you out of there. I promise you. Because it's bad for business. Right now, if you started, if just a group of y'all, 5 or 6 of you, stood together and started asking questions, you would put that place out of business. But awareness asks questions and notices contradiction. Awareness follows the evidence. It weighs the scale and eventually discovers what my eye has been teaching this whole time. Consequence. So perhaps only God can judge me never meant leave me alone. Perhaps it meant the truth will be revealed in my fruit. And family, if the truth is the judge, the verdict is already coming in every day through your body, through your mind, your relationships, your peace, your suffering. And the witness has testified tonight. And the court finds that the question was never, will God judge me? The question has always been, how is it showing up in my life? I'm going to get out of here. Family, for months now, Ty's been saying God is dead, unalived. Please don't flag me. And every time I say it, I know, you're getting nervous. What I'm saying is the old ideas you used to organize your life around are losing power. Those old explanations are no longer explaining reality. Those old answers that they gave you are no longer answering the questions. And you're still acting as if nothing has changed. In other words, the old God image is dead, unalived. I got to work on that. I inherited interpretations of unalivement. I unquestioned certainty or unalived. And perhaps that's why we've been examining this statement all night. Because if the God that you've inherited cannot withstand examination, then perhaps what no longer has life is not truth. Perhaps what's no longer sustaining life is the illusion. And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. And you will call it fate. So Ty, I still believe only God can judge me. To that question I have to ask before I answer, when you say God, are you talking about something outside of yourself? Something separate from you? Something sitting somewhere waiting to evaluate your life? Or are you talking about the truth, order, balance, and intelligence woven into creation itself? So when you tell me that, My response is, if God, you mean truth, then yes. If God, you mean balance, then yes. If God, you mean laws of cause and effects operating through creation, then yes. And yes, if you're saying that I recognize who I am. But the part that we most miss is that judgment may not be waiting for you later. Your life is already the reflection. Your relationships, your body, your nervous system. The scales don't lie. Is your life peaceful? Is it growing? The scale is going to reveal that. And I'm not just talking about physical things, because you can't take none of it with you. The riches are the things that you're clinging to. The scales are the weighing your possessions. And maybe that's why the rich man walked away sad. And I hope that won't be you. Because one thing he was asked to leave behind was the one thing he couldn't let go of. And that is the real question before the court. What owns you? What are you not willing to let go of tonight? And whatever that is, that's the very thing standing between you and the truth. And that's trying to set you free. Examine yourself. Is it fear, confusion? Whatever yours is, put your name on it. One more time, as Dr. Simatawi says, how does it show up in your life? Because your life is already revealing what is in alignment and what is out of alignment. And that revelation is the judgment. Will God judge me? The question has always been the question, has always answered. You are the judge. What do you decide? And with that, I'm going to close it and find it guilty. Case number ISWY 777, the human nervous system versus fear-based religion, is submitted and found guilty by the jury. And the court rests tonight. That's going to be it for me tonight, family. Happy Sunday. Is it still Sunday? Yeah, it's still Sunday. Happy Sunday. Thank you guys for coming in and holding space with me tonight. Come back again. Hotep.